Welcome back to The Deep Dive. It is Thursday, February 5th, 2026. And I have to say, looking at the stack of research we have on the table today, the world feels incredibly contradictory right now.
Contradictory is a polite way to put it.
It is. I mean, if you're feeling a little bit of whiplash from the headlines this week, you are definitely not alone.
It's been a week of absolute extremes, hasn't it?
It really has. I mean, think about the split screen we're all looking at. On one side, you've got chaos in the halls of Davos with President Trump making his third visit and, stirring the pot.
Right.
Then you have this fascinating shift in local politics right here in New York City with the rise of affordability politics.
And then on the other side of that screen, kind of buried in the strategic journals, is this terrifying new military scenario brewing in Estonia that could threaten the entire NATO alliance.
Exactly. It feels like we're trying to build a futuristic utopia on top of a geopolitical earthquake. And the mission for this deep dive is really to find the signal in that noise. We're going to be unpacking a stack of sources that highlight this specific tension. The tension between immense technological progress and genuine old-school geopolitical peril.
That's the core question, isn't it? Are we actually building a better future, or are we just distracting ourselves with better gadgets while the international order, burns down?
To help us figure that out, we've got some heavy hitters in the stack today. We're looking at analysis from the Hoover Institution's Goodfellows. That's Tyler Cowen, Niall Ferguson, and H.R. McMaster. We've got economic reality checks from Marginal Revolution, deep philosophical questions from The Point magazine, and a chilling strategic breakdown from Carla Masala's new book, If Russia Wins.
And for you listening, if you felt like the news lately is just a blur of political theater and tech hype, stick with us. We are going to connect these dots to show you the bigger picture of where 2026 is actually heading.
So let's start with that geopolitical stage. All eyes were on Davos, Switzerland this week. President Trump dropped in for his third visit to the World Economic Forum. And according to the Hoover Institution's Goodfellows, it was quite the scene.
Kerfuffle was the word they used, I believe.
Right, a kerfuffle.
Yeah.
You have the American president facing off against these globalist elites. But I want to push on this a bit because the standard narrative is just Trump causes chaos.
Yeah, that's the easy take.
But Tyler Cowen, the economist in the group, he posed a much more interesting question in their analysis. He asked, is Trump actually winning?
It sounds counterintuitive, right? Given all the noise.
It does. But Cowen's point, and this is where it gets interesting, is to ask whether Trump and his so-called globalist foes actually have more in common than they admit.
Right. Cowen suggests that we need to look past the rhetoric. The argument is that Trump is a disruptor, sure.
Of course.
But that disruption is forcing the international system to reconfigure in ways that even his critics are having to adapt to. He's not just breaking the china, he's rearranging the table. And Cowen argues that the globalists are finding they have to play by these new, tougher rules if they want to survive.
So it's less about them fighting him and more about the whole world becoming more Trumpian.
In a sense, yes. More transactional, more focused on immediate national interests.
And what's fascinating is that this shift isn't just happening in the Swiss Alps, it's happening on the domestic front too. The sources point to this rise of what they call affordability politics.
Right, this is the trend epitomized by the new mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani.
Exactly. Now, Mamdani ran as a democratic socialist, which, usually triggers a specific set of ideological debates.
Sure.
But the sources argue that in 2026, the label matters less than the driver, and the driver is the cost of living.
It's purely economic anxiety.
It is. Whether it's Trump in Davos rejecting global deals or Mamdani in New York capping rents, the underlying current is the same. The system has become too expensive and too unstable for the average person.
And the sources mention some really tense undercurrents feeding this. I mean, there's the fallout from Minneapolis where you had that tragic incident with federal agents and protesters.
Yeah.
And there's this looming question of potential U.S. military strikes against Iran.
It feels like the temperature is just rising everywhere. And this connects to a debate the historians Niall Ferguson and H.R. McMaster were having in the source material. They were discussing whether anyone can truly claim to be on the right side of history in a landscape this chaotic.
That is such a loaded phrase, the right side of history.
It implies there's a script, right?
Yeah.
We know how the movie ends.
Exactly. It implies a clear moral arc where good inevitably triumphs. But Ferguson and McMaster are looking at the friction in Davos, the affordability crisis in New York, the instability in the Middle East.
Right.
And they're saying There is no script. The path isn't clear at all. You don't land on the right side by accident. You have to enforce it.
And speaking of enforcing things, let's pivot to the most disturbing part of our sack. Because while we're distracted by the political theater in Davos or New York, there is a hard security threat developing that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
We pulled a transcript from an interview with Carlo Massala about his book, If Russia Wins. And honestly, this kept me up last night.
It's a chilling thought experiment.
He lays out a scenario set just 2 years from now in March 2028. It focuses on a place most people probably couldn't find on a map. Narva, Estonia.
Right. Narva, a city of about, 57,000 people, right on the border with Russia. And Massala calls it the soft underbelly of NATO.
Okay, so why Narva? Why not invade a capital city?
Because Narva has a large Russian-speaking minority. It allows for ambiguity. It's the exact same playbook we saw in the Donbass in Ukraine back in 2014.
I see.
You don't start with tanks. You start with protecting the locals. But the scenario, it assumes a few preconditions that feel uncomfortably plausible for where we are in 2026.
This is the backstory. First, it assumes the war in Ukraine has ended.
Yes, with a Peace of Geneva.
Which sounds great. We all want peace.
We do. But in Massala's scenario, this peace deal leaves Russia holding on to occupied territory. So essentially, Russia perceives it has won. They outlasted the West.
And crucially, the scenario posits that Putin has been replaced.
This was the twist that really got me. Putin is gone.
Replaced by?
By a younger, charming successor from the financial sector, someone who speaks perfect English, who wears nice suits, who lulls Europe and the U.S. into a false sense of security.
The West thinks, okay, the bad guy's gone, we can go back to business as usual.
Exactly. So Europe pauses its rearmament efforts. The U.S. pivots its attention elsewhere. And that is exactly when the trap springs.
So walk us through the actual scenario. It's March 2028. What happens?
It starts with low-threshold warfare. We are already seeing this today. Warehouse fires, cable cuts in the Baltic Sea, drone incursions.
Annoying, but not an act of war.
Right. It's designed to be deniable. Then Russia makes a move on Narva, or maybe they seize a sparsely populated island in the Baltic Sea. Something small.
But why? If they have Ukraine, why risk a fight over a tiny town in Estonia?
Because the goal isn't the land. The goal is to destroy NATO.
Okay.
Massala uses the analogy of Hitler remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936. It's a test of resolve. The gamble is this. If Russia takes a small city like Narva, will NATO invoke Article 5?
We hear Article 5 a lot. Remind us exactly what that triggers.
Article 5 is the core of the treaty. It says an attack on one member is an attack on all members. If Estonia is attacked, the United States, France, Germany, the UK, they are all treaty-bound to go to war to defend it.
Potentially nuclear war.
Potentially nuclear war.
Okay.
So the Russian gamble is that the West won't do it.
Precisely. Imagine the Situation Room in the White House. The president is told that Russian troops are in Narva, claiming to protect ethnic Russians. The Russian leader says, this is a local issue, but if you attack us, we will use tactical nuclear weapons.
Wow.
The president has to decide. Do I risk New York or Chicago to save a city of 57,000 people on the Russian border?
And if they hesitate, if they say, let's negotiate,
then the alliance collapses. The moment you prove that Article 5 is optional or conditional, NATO is dead. Every country in Europe realizes the security guarantee is a lie, and the entire post-World War II order just falls apart.
That is terrifying. It's a psychological checkmate.
And it gets worse. Massala points out that China plays a role here too.
Of course.
The scenario describes a multi-domain strategy. While Russia pressures Europe, China creates friction in the South China Sea, specifically with the Philippines, to stretch American resources thin.
So the U.S. is looking one way and Russia strikes the other way.
Exactly. It's a coordination of chaos.
Okay, that is heavy. I think we need to take a breath, because if we just focus on that, we're going to spiral.
Right. And the sources aren't all doom and gloom. There is this other side of the coin. The progress side.
We have to look at the ledger. For this, we turn to the Point magazine and the work of economist Tyler Cowen, specifically his concept of progress studies.
So despite the shadow of war, Cowen thinks we're actually living in a golden age.
He argues we're entering one. He suggests we suffered a great stagnation from about 1973 until very recently.
Define great stagnation for me, because we had the internet in that time. We had iPhones.
True, we got better at moving information bits and bytes. But Cowan argues that in the physical world, how fast we travel, how we generate energy, and crucially, median wage growth things slowed down significantly compared to the early 20th century.
But he thinks we're breaking out of that now.
He does. He argues that here in 2026, we are finally seeing the breakthroughs hit the physical economy, specifically in green energy and inevitably AI.
AI is the big one. Cowan has this really optimistic take that AI is becoming a universal tutor.
This is a huge deal for equity. The idea is that every child, regardless of how rich their parents are or where they live, will have access to a personalized AI tutor that knows exactly how they learn.
Wow.
It could solve the education gap in a way no policy ever has.
And he also points out something about the workforce. He says AI is writing the boring half of computer code.
Right. If you're a developer, you know that a lot of coding is just syntax and error checking. It's grunt work. If AI takes that over, it frees up human creativity to focus on the architecture, the big ideas. It makes us more productive and less bogged down.
I love that. Less grunt work, more innovation. But, the deep dive wouldn't be complete without a counterpoint. The source brings up a philosophical clash with Leo Tolstoy.
Yes, bring in the Russian existential dread.
Tolstoy argued that progress is essentially meaningless.
Yeah.
His point was, look, the peasant in the field dies, and the sophisticated man of culture dies. They both end up in the same ground.
Right.
So all this progress, railroads, telegraphs, or now AI, is just a distraction from the inevitable.
It's the ultimate so what critique. Does better dentistry make life more meaningful?
Well, Cowan's rebuttal is pretty funny. He basically says, yes, I prefer modern dentistry. Thank you very much.
And he's right. Cowan argues that looking back at the past with rose-colored glasses is dangerous. Life in Tolstoy's Russia was miserable for the vast majority of people. Serfdom, disease, starvation.
Yeah. For Cowan, progress isn't about escaping death. It's about having the option to live in a wealthy society or a cabin in the woods rather than being forced into poverty by birth.
It's about agency. Progress gives us the luxury of choice.
Exactly.
But, and here's where the rubber meets the road, we can talk about progress in the abstract, but when we try to legislate it, things can get messy. We have some analysis from Marginal Revolution on the pharmaceutical industry that fits perfectly here.
This is a classic example of unintended consequences. So the Trump administration has proposed a plan to peg U.S. drug prices to the lowest international prices.
Which, on the surface, sounds fantastic. Why should an American pay $100 for a pill when a French person pays $20? It feels unfair.
It feels incredibly unfair. But Alex Tabarrok, the economist analyzing this, calls it a lose-lose-lose scenario.
Okay, walk me through the math. Why is it a loss?
You have to understand the business model. Pharmaceutical companies have massive fixed costs for R&D. The first pill costs $1 billion to invent. The second pill costs 50 cents to make.
Currently, the U.S. market pays the high prices that cover that billion-dollar R&D. Europe, which uses price controls, pays much less.
I see.
The pharma companies accept this because selling to France for a small profit is better than not selling at all. They cover the R&D with American money.
But if the U.S. says, we are only paying the French price,
then the math breaks.
Yeah.
The company can't cover the $1 billion, so they have a hard choice. One, they stop selling to France entirely, so there is no low-price benchmark for the U.S. to reference.
So France loses access to the drug. That's loss number one.
Right. Or, option two, the drug company looks at the spreadsheet and says, it's not worth developing the next drug. They cut R&D.
So we get cheaper pills today, but we don't get the cure for Alzheimer's tomorrow.
Exactly. That is the lose-lose-lose. Americans might not even get cheaper drugs, Europeans lose access, and the whole world loses out on future innovation. It's a policy that tries to force a fair outcome, but ends up destroying the progress engine.
It's a stark reminder that you can't just wave a magic wand. Let's look at one more data point from Marginal Revolution that challenges our assumptions. Poverty.
This one really surprised me.
We often hear about the war on poverty that started in the 60s. The narrative is that big government programs save the poor.
Yes, post-1964. But the data shows that the decline in absolute poverty was actually faster before the war on poverty began, between 1939 and 1963.
Wait, really? Poverty was dropping faster without the programs?
Yes, because market income, wages, jobs, economic growth was doing the heavy lifting. People were earning their way out. Before the big government transfers kicked in, fewer than 3% of working-age adults were dependent on the government.
And after?
After the programs expanded, that dependency rate jumped to between 7 and 15%.
So we shifted from an economy where people were climbing out of poverty to one where the government was filling the gap.
Exactly. And the takeaway isn't that safety nets are bad. It's that economic growth is the most powerful anti-poverty program we have. If you stifle growth with those pharma price controls, you hurt the poor the most.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We have one last study to cover, and this one is a total aha moment. It's about hip-hop.
I love this study. It's by Roland Fryer. He used AI to analyze rap lyrics from 1980 all the way to 2020.
And I assume he found what we all suspect.
Oh, yeah. The lyrics became about 5 times more explicit and violent over that period. The misogyny, the references to violence, it all skyrocketed.
So the parents in the 90s screaming about the decline of civilization were right.
Well, they were right about the lyrics, but Fryer took the next step. He looked for a correlation between exposure to this music and real-world outcomes in those communities.
Like crime rates or education.
Exactly. And he found zero correlation. None.
Wow.
Despite the lyrics getting grittier, there was no link to higher crime or lower educational outcomes in the communities listening to it.
So all that moral panic
Was just that. Panic. It's a prime example of how we often worry about the wrong things. We obsess over lyrics while we ignore the massive geopolitical shifts happening in places like Estonia.
And that brings us full circle. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
So let's try to synthesize this. What does this all mean for 2026?
I think we are looking at a world of extreme fragility. On one hand, we have the tools for a golden age. We have AI acting as a universal tutor. We have data showing that our culture isn't actually rotting our brains. We are breaking the great stagnation.
But on the other
hand, the foundation is cracking. We have 1936-style geopolitical tests brewing in the Baltics with the Narva scenario. We have economic policies in healthcare that might accidentally strangle innovation.
It feels like we were walking a tightrope.
We are. And the so what here is that progress isn't a straight line. It requires defense. You can't have the universal tutor if NATO collapses and Europe is at war.
Right.
You have to defend the boring institutions, the treaties, the alliances that create the stability for the fun stuff to happen.
You can't just enjoy the fruits of 2026 technology without maintaining the 1945 security order.
Exactly. And this raises an important question for everyone listening to mull over.
What's that?
We talked about the Peace of Geneva in the Massalas scenario, a hypothetical peace deal that ends the war in Ukraine but leaves Russia feeling victorious.
Mm-hmm.
If we see a deal like that signed this year, or if things feel quiet in the news, ask yourself, are we actually living in a period of peace?
Or is this just the quiet before the storm of the Narva scenario?
And if history starts moving fast again, like really fast,
Yeah.
Are you prepared for what that looks like?
That is a thought to chew on. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.